I am Clara, 33 years old, and tonight I am the widow with a house full of quiet. The flowers from the service lean in a crystal vase. The ribbon is already wilting. My mother placed a heavy folder on my kitchen table. In the kind, with brass corners and a clean notary stamp on the flap, she did not take off her coat. Sign the deed over to Lydia. This isn't your home anymore. She said, I rested my hand on the cool metal of the spare keys. I could feel the little cut on my thumb where a key nicked me at the cemetery. Before I go further, I would tell me where you are watching from. And if family and money have ever collided in your life, hit subscribe. I promise this part matters. There is a fairness to paperwork. Paper does not flatter. It lists names, dates, signatures. That is all. In my work, I have watched strangers untangle messes with the edge of a stapled packet. But I never thought my mother would bring a folder to my house the night we placed Ethan's ashes in the urn. She sat straight as a church pew, eyes on the deed, not on me. My father stood behind her, hand on her shoulder like a seal of approval. Lydia, my younger sister, filmed a silent story for her followers from the entryway mirror, a corner of the black ribbon caught in frame. We were born into a tidy hierarchy. Lydia arrived 2 years after me with a halo of dark curls and a laugh that turned heads. She learned early how to fill a room. I learned how to step around one. My mother called Lydia our family's face. My father called her our future. I was the steady one. I made lists. I read the fine print. I paid attention. When Lydia landed an internship that mostly involved wearing a lanyard and posting photographs from charity galas, my mother clapped and said, "Spectacular." When I finished a grueling certification that kept me up 3 months in a row, she nodded and said, "That is what we expect." The pattern was polite at first. On my 10th birthday, the cake stayed in the bakery box because Lydia had a recital across town and family shows up for the star. I took the candles home in a paper sleeve. I remember their thin, waxy weight in my pocket. Senior year. I gave the commencement speech to a row of empty seats my parents left after the choir because Lydia was presenting at a club and needed someone to zip her dress. My mother hugged me later and murmured, "We saw you practice." In college, Lydia had a campus apartment furnished with glossy catalog pieces. I signed loan papers and a cafeteria job schedule. Then learned which shift left me enough time to study "Do not be dramatic." My mother said, when I called one night, half asleep, "Hard work builds character." I believed her. I kept my head down and worked. None of this made me noble. It made me quiet. When my father needed a procedure, an anonymous payment found its way to the hospital account. The clerk mailed a receipt with a thin blue stamp. When Lydia's big campaign nearly collapsed over delayed photo rights, a friend of a friend settled the licensing fee in full. A plain envelope slid under a studio door before dawn. When my mother's card obligations became an anchor, a counselor from a nameless program negotiated a reduced balance. My mother called later and said, "I'm surprised," that perhaps the bank had finally recognized her loyalty. I did not correct her. I wrote each amount in a private ledger and tucked the ledger in the back of a cookbook. Ethan never used Ethan. There is no clean way to say his name without stopping. He was the person who reminded me to look up, who watered the fig tree when I forgot, who saved ticket stubs in a chipped bowl. We met in a classroom with bad lighting and a kind professor who believed in questions. We fell in love during years that were not easy and therefore felt earned. There are no villains in grief. There is only absence. Still, in the week he slipped away, in the family group chat, filled with rehearsal dinner schedules and bridesmaid color palettes, my mother texted from a rooftop brunch to ask for my availability for a photo call. I read it in a hospital hallway with my back to a vending machine. Later, When I sent the time and address for the service, I received a single heart from Lydia and a thinking of you from my father. They did not appear. If you have ever been the reliable one nobody appreciates, you will understand this part. After the service, the house held that particular silence that comes after people leave and plates sit in the sink. I tucked the program into the front pocket of my coat and kissed my thumb by habit. There was funeral dust on everything, like a fine gray spell. Then the doorbell. My mother walked straight to the table and set down the folder. The notary stamp winked in the lamplight. My father opened and closed his hands. Lydia, in black, with a neckline too sharp for the hour, leaned against the fridge and said, "You look tired. Clara, we should wrap this up." My mother slid the folder toward me with one finger. Family stability, she said, requires clarity. She did not meet my eye. You will sign. Lydia's wedding is in a few weeks. It cannot be overshadowed by confusion about where everyone belongs. The folder smelled faintly of toner and someone else's soap. I turned it once and saw my name through the manila, silent as a bruise. I thought of smaller objects that had carried me the gel pen I bought the day I took my first case, the lemon yellow legal pad with the good paper, Ethan's house key on a little brass ring shaped like a lighthouse. I thought of a night last winter when the heat knocked out and I made tea on the stove by candlelight. Ethan read me a line about how storms teach you your roof. You do not forget lines like that. They fit in your pocket and go with you. What I didn't know, I should say now, because it is true, was how far they had already gone. I found out later there were messages in a group chat where my name figured mostly as a problem to solve. I found out later a video existed with clinking glasses, my sister's laugh, and a sentence that stung like a slap. But tonight, I only knew the folder on my table, the stamp on its edge, the slight shadow of my father in the doorway. You can dislike a person and still recognize how tired they look. Even that understanding did not move me to sign. Clara. My father said, and his voice had the careful calm he uses with clients and small dogs, "Let us not drag this through the week." Lydia's voice cut across his sign. "Do not make this uglier than it needs to be." I studied the grain of the table. One groove ran like a tiny river from the sugar bowl to the folder. I moved the sugar bowl aside and the groove kept going. Some lines do. Before I continue, tell me where you are watching from. If you have ever sat at a table where people decided your life while pretending to pass the salt, click like so. I know I am not alone. I made tea. I turned on the kettle because hands need tasks. The lid clicked. The burner gave a low blue flame. My mother shook her head like I was ungrateful for hot water. "We have places to be," she said, which meant fittings and floral mock-ups and a photographer with opinions. She reached for a pen from my cup, the one with the tiny feather. I covered the folder with my palm. Here is what I will tell you about strength, because older listeners deserve plain talk. Strength is not a raised voice. It is the moment you stop explaining. It is the way your breath evens out after a long climb. It is remembering what you promised a good man when there was still time to promise anything at all. I promised Ethan I would not disappear myself, to keep peace that never included me. I did not sign. I closed the folder. The metal corners made a small, final sound. I told them we would meet at a proper table tomorrow, with good light and witnesses, not here in my kitchen with a damp ribbon and Lydia's phone face down beside the sink. My mother stood. Lydia muttered, "Ungrateful," under her breath, and took a photograph of the stove. My father said we would be in touch. He left his business card on the windowsill as if I did not know his number. Little did they realize I had already decided where the next table would be and who would be seated. and which documents would be read aloud in a calm voice. They had no idea that while I stirred my tea, a line had been crossed, and there would be no polite return. By the time the first winter passed without Ethan, I had learned how to walk with two shadows, mine and the one he left behind. The family, meanwhile, carried on as if grief were an inconvenience. They filled their calendars with fittings and luncheons, leaving me to measure silence in teacups. Yet their demands did not lessen. If anything, they grew louder, disguised as polite requests but heavy as stones. Clara, you should handle the deposit for the florist. My mother said one evening, she called it a small favor, though the invoice read nearly $20,000. Lydia added a note in the family chat. You are the responsible one. You understand paperwork. That phrase, responsible one, was a leash they had used for years. I paid, as I had many times before, and marked the sum in my private ledger. Each entry was a bruise no one else saw. The truth is, I had been building something they never bothered to ask about. With a modest start, $5,000 from long nights at a junior associate desk, I began investing in real estate syndications that most people overlook small apartment complexes, quiet office buildings near commuter trains. I studied contracts the way some study scripture. By my third year, the returns crossed six figures. By my sixth year, I had interests spread across 3 states. And yet, when I sat at family dinners, my mother still introduced me as Clara, the one with that little law job. If you have ever worked twice as hard just to receive half the recognition, the flavor of that dismissal, there were milestones they never saw. The first year my business brought in over $1 million, I celebrated by replacing my kitchen table, the very table where they had shoved that folder at me, with a sturdier oak one, wide enough for both work and meals. The ledger lived in the top drawer. When my network grew, I formalized it under an LLC. The filings are public, but no one in my family bothered to look. They thought I was still a clerk, sorting envelopes. I let them think so. Silence was easier than explaining. Meanwhile, I kept answering their needs. When my father faced another hospital stay, I transferred $75,000 anonymously through a patient aid program. He told friends later that the hospital had shown unusual generosity when Lydia fell short on her venue payment. I funneled $50,000 through an escrow account disguised as a vendor credit. She bragged to her followers that her negotiating skills had won the day. When my mother's credit card debt ballooned, I arranged a settlement and paid $18,000 over 6 months through a church fund. She praised Providence at Sunday service, never knowing I was the one who steadied her. Why did I keep doing it? Habit, perhaps, or the hope that love could be purchased in small installments. But each time I wrote a check, I felt the weight of Ethan's absence more sharply. He had once told me, "Do not let them take your kindness for currency." I remembered those words. Even as I ignored them, the family's blindness was almost comical. At Lydia's engagement dinner, she lifted her glass and said, "Clara may not have glamour, but at least she knows how to keep the bills straight." Laughter followed. My father patted my shoulder, as if that were thanks. They had no idea that the investments I guided for clients now touched sums in the tens of millions, that my own holdings were worth several million more. They thought of me as the helper, the one who kept ledgers tidy. I let them laugh. There is power in being underestimated. What I did not know was how close the storm had drawn Their appetite was no longer for flowers or deposits, it was for permanence, for control. Behind the smiles and champagne toasts, papers were already being drafted. I would discover them soon enough, under brighter lights, and with a lawyer at my side. But on that evening, as Lydia posed for photographs and my mother arranged the angle of her necklace, I simply lifted my glass of water and thought, they see nothing. They have no idea. Have you ever had to prove yourself again and again to people who never wanted proof? Hit the like button if you know the feeling. I left the dinner early, claiming work. In truth, I needed the company of my files, the quiet authority of contracts that did not lie. On my desk lay deets, valuation letters, and a growing stack of statements. Each page was a reminder that I had carved a life beyond their reach. Each page was also a shield, though I did not yet realize how soon I would need it. As I locked the drawer, I thought of Ethan again. He would have smiled at the irony, a family so blind they could not see the house already built around them. The oak table stood steady in the lamplight, ledger tucked inside. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent and alive. Tomorrow would bring another demand, another test, and soon, the breaking point, the turning point came not with thunder, but with an ordinary Tuesday morning. I had risen early, brewed coffee, strong enough to cut through the fog, and prepared to face another day at the office. My phone buzzed. It was a message from a colleague who had no reason to contact me outside of work hours. The video he forwarded stopped me cold. In it, I saw Lydia, my mother, and a few others from the family gathered at a rooftop brunch. Glasses clinked. The skyline glowed behind them. And then Lydia's voice, "Holy," clear as glass breaking. Let her be sat alone. Ethan was dead weight anyway. The wedding is the real event. I watched it twice. By the third time, my hands trembled so much I had to set the phone down. That laughter, my mother's low chuckle, Lydia's bright trill was not new. But to hear them dismiss Ethan, who had carried my hope like a lantern, was a cruelty I could not excuse. Little did I realize this was just the prologue. That evening, and they came to my home again. My father carried another folder, thicker than before. My mother wore the air of someone attending a board meeting, not a daughter's kitchen. Lydia stood behind them, tapping her nails against her phone screen. My father laid the folder on the oak table. "This is for the family trust," he said, voice steady but eyes darting. "We need you to sign an amendment." I opened the folder. Legal language leapt from the page clauses that would strip my rights. Redirecting all major assets into Lydia's name for stability and continuity. In plain speech, it was a demand for my surrender. "You have 24 hours," my mother said, as if setting a deadline for flowers. "Either you sign this, or we will contest your claim. The trust will side with Lydia. You know how these things go. Let us not embarrass ourselves in court. Embarrass ourselves." Lydia repeated, lips curling, meaning you never belonged in that apartment anyway. It is mine now. Do not drag this out. Something inside me broke, then not like glass shattering, but like a rope snapping after years of strain. The words landed with physical weight. My vision blurred. My knees threatened to buckle. I steadied myself against the table, tracing the grain with my fingertips. "You are nothing without this family." Lydia added, her tone bright with disdain, "Do not fool yourself. You cannot stand alone." For a moment, I could not breathe. The room pressed in, their faces blurred into one shape of disdain. Then something hardened inside me. I realized the victim they thought they knew no longer existed. I closed the folder slowly. Deliberately, I will not sign this. I said, on my voice, even though my heart pounded like a drum. My father's jaw tightened. Do not be foolish. Clara, think of Lydia's future. Think of the family name. I have thought, I replied, more than you realize. I walked to the sideboard and opened a drawer. Inside lay copies of deeds, title reports, escrow, receipts, all meticulously preserved. I also carried something far more damning, the video from the rooftop brunch, preserved on a flash drive. And I had allies now. Maya Patel, a lawyer I trusted, had already begun gathering documents at my request. Andre Lewis, a financial advisor with a sharp eye, had compiled valuations impossible to dispute. They did not know any of this. As far as they could see, I was still the dutiful daughter, the reliable one with steady hands. I closed the drawer quietly and turned back to them. We will meet tomorrow, I said, at Maya's office. If you want a signature, it will be in proper light, with witnesses, and with all documents present. My mother frowned. There is no need for drama. Drama, I said. My voice calm now. You brought the stage here. Not me. Lydia snared. You are wasting everyone's time. No, I said, meeting her eyes. For the first time, I am saving it. They left in a flurry of coats and perfume, muttering about ungratefulness and stubbornness. When the door shut, I sat in the quiet and allowed the tremors to run their course. My hands shook. My breath came in ragged bursts. I pressed them flat against the table until the tremors passed. In that moment, I made a decision. I would not be bullied. I would not sign away Ethan's memory, all my dignity, for their convenience. The next morning, I would arrive not as their scapegoat, but as their equal, or perhaps their better. I gathered the evidence into a leather folder, slid the flash drive into a pocket, and placed both beside my coat. I called Maya and confirmed the appointment. I called Andre and asked him to prepare the valuations. I checked the small camera by my door, grateful it had captured tonight's conversation. As I set everything in place, a sense of calm settled over me. Not peace exactly, but clarity. They believed they still held the upper hand. They had no idea that the ground was already shifting beneath them. Tomorrow, the masks would drop. Tomorrow, the power would change hands. Morning light fell across Maya Patel's conference table. A wide slab of walnut polished to a gentle shine. The blinds were half drawn, filtering the city into muted streaks of gray. At one end, Maya sat ready with her legal pad, her posture calm and unshakable. Beside her, Andre Lewis adjusted a neat stack of valuation reports, his glasses catching the light. I sat between them, my leather folder resting on the table. 9 o'clock sharp. The door opened. My parents entered first. Faces set in stiff confidence. Lydia followed, phone in hand, dressed as though arriving for a photo shoot rather than a legal meeting. Her heels clicked against the floor in sharp punctuation. They clustered together on the far side, expressions ranging from smug to impatient. This shouldn't take long. My father said, loosening his tie as though preparing for an easy victory. My mother gave a quick glance at the papers on Maya's side and smiled faintly, convinced they were already hers. Lydia leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs, scrolling through messages. Let's get this over with, she said. Maya cleared her throat. We are here to review the amendment Clara was presented with last night. She has not signed. Today, she will respond formally. My mother waved a hand. She knows what's best for the family. It's only a matter of time. That was the moment I reached for the folder. I slid out the first document, a financial statement, crisp and irrefutable. What you don't know, I said evenly, is that I own holdings worth over $12 million. Apartments in Ohio, a warehouse in Pennsylvania, office complexes in New Jersey. Here are the deeds. I spread them out like cards in a game they had already lost. For the first time, silence filled the room. My father's jaw slackened, then tightened. My mother's hand froze on the armrest. Lydia leaned forward, phone forgotten, her eyes wide. That's impossible. She whispered. Andre spoke then, his voice steady. I've compiled valuations on each property. They are current, accurate, and conservative together. Clara's portfolio exceeds what the trust amendment even sought to control. He tapped the papers. These are not estimates. These are facts. The room tilted. Here! I saw it in their faces the moment power slipped from their grasp. My mother's lips pressed pale. My father rubbed his temple as if struck by sudden pain. Lydia's color rose. She sputtered. You're lying. Maya lifted a hand. All of this has been verified. It is indisputable. Contesting, it would not only fail, but risk exposure of last night's coercion attempt. She slid another paper forward, a transcript from my front door camera, showing my family's words, their threats, their insults. My father reached for the paper, then hesitated, as though touching it might burn. The victim you thought you had, I said quietly, is gone. I will not sign your amendment. I will not surrender what Ethan and I built, or what I built on my own, and I will not be bullied again. My mother tried to recover, her voice trembling. We didn't know. If you had told us, if I had told you, I interrupted. You would have taken more. You laughed while I buried my husband. You plotted while I paid your bills. No, you do not deserve to know what I've built. Not then, not now. The silence deepened. Even the city sounds outside seemed distant. Lydia opened her mouth, closed it, then pushed her chair back with a loud scrape. This isn't over, she muttered, but her voice lacked its usual edge. It is, Maya replied, calm as stone, legally, morally, and practically. This meeting is finished. I gathered the deeds, the valuations, the flash drive, sliding them back into the folder. My hands no longer trembled. I stood, and for the first time in years, I looked at my family not as authority, but as strangers caught in their own reflection. Justice is not loud. I said, voice steady. It's simply clear. And today, it is mine. I turned toward the door, the leather folder firm in my hand, behind me. The room sat heavy with their disbelief, their shame, their sudden helplessness, The tables had turned. In the days that followed that meeting, the air around me seemed lighter. For the first time in years, I slept without waking in the middle of the night, clutching at old fears. Yet the silence from my family did not last. When people lose power, they do not surrender gracefully. They scramble. The first attempt came with flowers, grand arrangements of lilies and roses delivered daily, each with a card signed, "With love, from your family." I left them unopened, wilting in their plastic sleeves on the porch. Soon after came boxes of pastries from Lydia's favorite bakery, then an expensive handbag I had never asked for. The gifts grew desperate, louder with each delivery. When the gifts failed, the messages began. My father called at odd hours, leaving voicemails that swung from stern to pleading. "Clara, this can still be resolved. You don't want to carry bitterness. Family is family." My mother texted photographs of Lydia's wedding gown. Captions reading, "We want you to be part of this moment." Lydia herself sent a single line late one night. "You can't abandon us." Not now. If you've ever had relatives who only call when they need something, the hollow sound behind those words. I held my boundaries. I answered none of the calls. When Lydia escalated, appearing uninvited at my office building, Maya filed for a restraining order. The judge signed it within a week. My father's attempt to draw from a joint account failed when the bank confirmed the account had long since been closed under my authority. Their attempts to spin the story in social circles crumbled once. Andre released a carefully worded statement confirming the legitimacy of my holdings and the documented coercion attempts. The consequences fell quickly. Vendors withdrew from Lydia's campaign after learning of financial irregularities. My father's business partners pulled back, wary of entanglement. My mother found her social invitations dwindling. Once whispers of the video spread among her circle, their power, once assumed to be unshakable, collapsed in on itself. Meanwhile, I was not alone. My colleagues at the firm rallied, not out of pity, but respect. One told me, "You carried yourself with more composure than most seasoned litigators." Friends visited, filling my home with conversation and laughter that felt genuine, not conditional. Andre and Maya, once just professionals, became anchors. They reminded me that support could be steady and clean, free from manipulation. There were moments of temptation, moments when I considered revealing every cruel word, every dollar I had secretly spent on their behalf. But each time, I remembered the silence on my birthday, the empty seats at graduation, the absence at Ethan's hospital bed. Revenge would have been easy. Justice was better. I chose the high road. Still, I did not turn away from all responsibilities. I set aside education funds for Lydia's children, should she one day have them, managed by my financial team and untouchable by adult hands. I created a small scholarship in Ethan's name for students who had lost a parent. These actions were not for my family, they were for innocence, for memory, for love. My family's desperation only deepened. They pleaded through mutual friends, through letters, even through public posts online. We made mistakes. One note read, "Please don't leave us like this." But mistakes imply accident. What they had done was choice, and choice brings consequence. The reality was clear without my quiet, hidden support. Their structure faltered without my silent payments. Their debt surfaced without my tolerance. Their cruelty stood naked. Justice, I realized often works best when you simply step aside and allow the truth to breathe. If you've ever wondered whether walking away is strength, let me assure you, it is. Setting boundaries is not cruelty. It is survival. So I walked forward, leaving their flowers to wither, their calls unanswered, their pleas unheeded. I did not slam the door. I simply closed it firmly. And finally, and as it shut, the lesson settled deep within me. Sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all. It is living with dignity while others drown in the consequences of their own choices. 6 months passed before I realized how much lighter my home felt. The air no longer carried tension. The rooms no longer echoed with words that bruised. I painted the walls a soft cream, planted roses in the yard, and moved Ethan's favorite chair by the window, where the morning light was kind. For the first time in years, the house felt like mine. Life, when lived without constant battles, grows in unexpected directions. I found myself drawn to people who knew me not as the family's problem solver, but as Clara, steady and whole. My colleagues became friends. We shared meals that stretched long into the evening, laughing without performance. I began volunteering at a community foundation that supported those estranged from their families. There, I met others who had walked similar paths, people who understood that blood can wound as easily as it binds. Together, we built something resembling a chosen family. The business thrived quietly. With fewer distractions, I expanded my portfolio, another apartment complex, a logistics hub, and a small investment in a local startup that promised to employ dozens. Andre called one day to tell me the total valuation of my holdings had nearly doubled. I listened, grateful, but more interested in how the scholarship fund in Ethan's name had already helped 3 students pay for school. Wealth, I discovered, was not in numbers, but in impact. And yet, my old family lingered at the edges. My mother called once when her social calendar thinned. My father reached out during a cash flow crisis. Lydia wrote a long email filled with apologies that rang hollow, ending with a request for short-term help. I answered politely, but firmly. My boundaries held. No more hidden payments. No more quiet rescues. The rope had been cut, and I had no desire to tie it back together. Looking back, I see that the greatest lesson was not about money or property, but about worth. Your value cannot be measured by those who refuse to see it. Family is not defined by shared blood, but by shared respect. Sometimes the family you choose friends, colleagues, strangers who become companions is stronger than the one you are born into. Have you ever had to redefine what family means? Do you believe forgiveness is automatic? Or must it be earned through action? Share your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear your stories. As for me, I carry forward with a heart steadier than before. I no longer bend under old demands. I no longer confuse silence with peace. I live, I work, I love in ways that honor Ethan, in ways that honor myself. The best revenge, I've learned, is not revenge at all. It is a life lived well, rooted in dignity, and shared with those who deserve it. Story 2. It was a Tuesday when my phone buzzed with a message. Just 3 words. We all agreed. At first, I stared at the screen, unsure what it meant yet. My gut sank before my mind could catch up. A minute later, another text arrived from Mom. You're not welcome at the wedding. No punctuation. just that smug little dash she always used when she wanted to sound formal, a smirk in text form, I reread those words, as though blinking harder might erase them. But they didn't change. This was Sarah's wedding, the very one I'd helped plan and paid for. I'd spent months dousing emotional flare-ups, consoling her breakdowns, booking every vendor. She was too frazzled to manage. The same sister who, just 2 weeks ago, had called me her emotional rock as I wired another $1, a $500 for centerpieces that looked like Pinterest threw up on a florist. My name is Kyle. I'm 31. And until that fateful text, I thought I was doing something good, holding this family together when it always teetered on the brink of falling apart. I'm no millionaire. Far from it. But I've scrimped and saved, lived modestly, stayed single, socked money away while everyone else splurged and borrowed. For years, I believed that made me blessed and them unlucky. Turns out, being the responsible one just makes you the family ATM with no overdraft protection. The wedding was supposed to be next Saturday. A beachside venue on the coast with a ridiculous ivory and gold theme my sister insisted was classy but looked more like a royal baby shower. I paid for half the venue deposit, booked the flights, even reserved the honeymoon suite in Cabo under my name because my mom's credit wasn't good enough to secure the reservation, and now I wasn't welcome. I didn't respond to the message. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened my laptop and quietly logged into the travel portal I'd used for the honeymoon flights. 2 round-trip tickets, business class. Under my email, I clicked cancel and watched the screen blink for a second before the $3 $800 refund notification popped up. Then I went into my savings account and initiated a transfer dollars, $500, the exact amount I had wired to my mom last month for what she claimed was wedding overflow costs. I didn't say a word to anyone. Just watched the numbers move. I felt nothing. Not anger, not even sadness, just a strange sort of calm, like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally exhaled. The first call came at 8:17 p.m. It was my sister. I let it ring. Then came my cousin. Then my uncle. Then mom. I turned off notifications and went about my night. Reheating leftovers and watching a documentary. I didn't absorb a second of my morning. There were 23 missed calls for voicemails and a single message that made my hand go cold. Please call me. It's that stopped me. My dad usually stays out of the chaos. He's a quiet man. The kind who'd rather tinker with a busted coffee maker than get involved in family drama. When I was a kid, I used to think he didn't care. As I got older, I realized it wasn't that he just picked his battles carefully. And for him to step into this one, something was off. But before I could process it, the voicemail started playing in my head, echoing. Even though I hadn't hit play, I imagined Sarah's whiny tone, mom's theatrical sobbing, maybe a guilt-laced message from an aunt who hadn't texted me in 2 years. I wanted to delete them all. I really did. But that one message from Dad lingered. This didn't come out of nowhere. It started small. A sideways comment here. A joke there. Last Christmas, Mom said, well, at least Sarah will give us grandkids. Not everyone can say that at the time. I laughed it off. I've never wanted kids, and I'm okay with that. But it stung in a way I didn't admit then. During Sarah's engagement dinner, I noticed I wasn't seated at the main table just to keep things even, Mom had said. But my younger cousin's boyfriend, who had only been around for 3 months, was seated next to the groom. I swallowed that one too. Like always, they were always little paper cuts, never big enough to justify a confrontation, until suddenly they were. After Sarah got engaged, everything became an emergency. Mom called me in a panic over cake samples. Sarah had meltdowns about bridesmaid dresses. I was expected to cover whatever the groom's family didn't. And I did, because I thought helping meant belonging. I thought showing up with my wallet was how I proved I mattered. But it never bought me a seat. It just made me the unpaid intern of their fantasy wedding, and now I wasn't even invited. I sat on the edge of my bed that morning, my laptop still open. The email confirmation of the canceled flights glowing like a quiet middle finger. I scrolled through the missed calls, each name a little louder than the last. Then I got to the message from Dad, just 6 words: "You need to see this now." That's when my stomach dropped. I stared at the message from Dad, my thumb hovering over the screen. "You need to see this now." 6 words, but they carried the weight of something heavier than guilt. My father has always been a man of few words, but every one of them is measured. He's not dramatic, like Mom. Not manipulative, like Sarah, and definitely not the type to panic. So if you said I needed to see something, it wasn't going to be another teary voicemail or passive-aggressive family group chat post. I called him. He picked up before the second ring. "Kyle," he said, voice low. "You got a minute, yeah?" I said, and suddenly my mouth was dry. What's going on? There was a pause. I could hear the muffled thrum of a television in the background, and then the volume clicked off. I didn't know they were going to do that. "Your mom and your sister," I just found out this morning, after they locked down the seating chart and made the announcement in the family group chat. I'm not even in the group chat. I muttered more to myself than him. "I know," he replied quietly. "That's part of it." Another pause. Then he said, "Kyle, they told everyone you chose not to come." That hit me harder than I expected. He blinked, trying to make sense of it. "What? They said you were pulling one of your loner stunts, that you got upset over something minor and backed out. Sarah told the family you were always a bit dramatic, and this time you went too far, that you didn't want to be there." I laughed. Sharp, bitter, humorless. "So they kicked me out and made it my decision." Worse. He said, "Your mom said you threatened to ruin the wedding if you came." That knocked the breath out of me. What Dad sighed, like, "You didn't want to be the one saying this?" She told Sarah's in-laws you were emotionally unstable, still bitter about being single, and that you were jealous of your sister's happy ending. Said you were making everything about you. Like usual. Like usual. My voice cracked. I had to stand up. My apartment suddenly felt like it was shrinking. "I know, son." Dad said quickly, "I know that's not who you are. I've watched you pick up every piece they dropped. You handled that entire engagement party and no one thanked you. You paid off Mom's second credit card last summer without saying a word. You showed up every time. They didn't, but they don't see that, or maybe they do. And it threatens them." I leaned against the kitchen counter, my hands shaking. So this whole thing, this exile, was a setup to make me the bad guy. That hesitated, then with an exhale, said, "It's worse than that. They already started telling people you refused to fund the honeymoon out of spite." That's when I knew something had changed in me. Something broke, but not in the way I thought it would. I wasn't hurt anymore. I wasn't even angry. It felt detached, cold, like I was watching a rerun of a show I used to care about, but now knew all the plot twist. 2, they took the money. Dad, I said flatly, $6. Wubei. Wired to mom's account for the honeymoon. I canceled the flights last night. The refund's already back in my account. He was silent for a moment. Then, softly, good. It was the first time in years my father had supported one of my decisions that openly, he wasn't a man of grand gestures, but that one word meant everything. Then he added, there's something else I wasn't going to tell you, but I think you need to see it. I heard rustling on the other end. Then the ping of a message coming through. I opened my phone. It was a screenshot, a group chat. Mom, Sarah, and a few of the aunts. My name was mentioned in the thread. Mom texted, don't worry about Kyle. He's just sensitive because no one's ever loved him enough to marry him. I'll talk to him after the wedding. Once he realizes how childish he's being, Sarah texted, he's a ghost. Let him fade. I just need to make sure he doesn't embarrass us. And Cheryl texted, so we're agreed, no +1 for him, even if he begs. Mom texted, exactly, no seat, no speech, no drama. He'll get over it. He always does. I read the messages twice, then a third time, and then I deleted them, not out of denial, but because I didn't need to see them again to know the truth. I'd always been an outsider in my own family, the helper, the fixer, the invisible glue. The glue doesn't get a seat at the table. It just holds everything else together while it cracks. And they were right about one thing. I wasn't going to beg that evening. I sat down and began making a list, not of people to confront, but of systems to dismantle. They wanted me to fade quietly, but they'd forgotten something. I was the one holding the strings. The joint Costco membership with Mom canceled the Hulu Netflix, Disney Plus family plans, removed their profiles, the auto payments I'd been quietly making on Sarah, student loan disabled. And the best part, the vineyard deposit for the wedding, still under my name. Technically, I was the primary contract holder. They never paid me back for that check. I wrote to lock in the date. I've been meaning to deal with that paperwork later. Now, it was at the top of my list as I stared at the contract hovering over the cancel reservation option. I smiled for the first time that day because if they thought I was dramatic before, they hadn't seen anything yet. But Wednesday morning, the silence from my end had them spiraling. The voicemails went from passive-aggressive to desperate. Sarah's tone morphed with every message. First annoyed, then pleading, Kyle, can we talk? I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. Mom didn't mean it that way. I didn't respond. I listened with my arms crossed. Each new message only confirming what I already knew. They were trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube, and it was far too late for that. But I wasn't interested in revenge for the sake of ego. This wasn't about lashing out. This was about letting go and making sure they felt it. That afternoon, I sat down with a black notebook and started writing out every account, every auto payment, every password-protected bill. I had my name attached to... I wasn't dramatic. I was thorough. The irony. They called me the cold one. The robot, the one who didn't feel things like the rest of us. They were right, in a way. I didn't blow up. I didn't scream. I calculated. I logged in Mom's phone plan. which I've been paying for since 2019. When she got laid off, suspended, she wouldn't even notice until she tried to make a call during her hair trial on Friday. Sarah's Venmo, which was connected to my bank as a backup card from when she overdrafted 3 times during college and never figured out how to remove it. Unlinked. And then I reported the suspicious charges on my account just for fun. Fraud protection is a beautiful thing. By Thursday morning, I had an email from the wedding venue, a polite but firm confirmation. Your cancellation request has been received per the contract. Your deposit will be forfeited unless a replacement booking is secured. I smiled. Let them explain that to the 118 guests flying in for a Saturday ceremony that suddenly didn't have a legal reservation. Around noon, my cousin Mark called. He's the only one who ever treated me like a person, not a tool. His voice was tired. Kyle, what's happening? I didn't lie. I'm done funding a family that sees me as a wallet with legs. He sighed. They're freaking out. Good. Sarah's having a meltdown. She's saying you're ruining her marriage. I gave a dry laugh. If a canceled flight and a frozen honeymoon fund ruins a marriage, maybe it wasn't built to last. You didn't argue. You just said, I wish you'd told me sooner. I always knew they leaned on you too much. That night, I opened my laptop again and logged into my dad's old Dropbox account, the one we used when I helped him digitize all the family records a few years back. Inside was a goldmine of scanned receipts, emails, even the original invoice from the engagement party that I paid for. But Mom conveniently forgot. I created a new Google Drive folder, uploaded everything, entitled it Contributions from Kyle Nobody Wanted. Then I copied the link and sent it to every family member on the group thread. I didn't write a caption. I didn't need one. Less than 5 minutes later, I was kicked out of the family chat. Perfect. But the real turn came Friday morning, the day before the wedding. I was sipping coffee and enjoying the quiet when I got an email from the groom's mother. Linda, we'd met once. She was kind, poised, and very by the book. The kind of woman who kept her silverware aligned and said, darling, instead of sweetie. Her message was short, but it rattled me more than any voicemail subject, concern about the wedding. Kyle, I wanted to reach out directly. I've heard bits and pieces about what's going on. And quite frankly, I'm alarmed. If you have a moment, could we speak? I feel like I'm missing some very important information. Linda, that was the moment I realized this wasn't just family gossip anymore. This was a thread unraveling from both ends. I called her. She answered immediately, "Thank you for calling." She said, formal, but with an edge of concern, "I don't mean to overstep, but my son just informed me that the venue may have been canceled. I said plainly, I paid the deposit. It was under my name." She was quiet for a second. "That's not what we were told." "I'm sure." Another pause. She cleared her throat. "Kyle, I don't know what's been said, but I was told you declined to come. That you'd backed out because you were bitter?" I let the silence hang, then asked, "Do bitter people usually pay for floral arrangements, the wedding cake, the DJ, and half the venue?" Linda inhaled sharply. "I was unaware of any of that." "Of course you were. They needed someone to blame when I pulled out, and when I stopped funding it, they made sure to do what they always do. Point the finger at me." Her voice lowered. "I understand now why you've distanced yourself. I would have to, but..." Kyle, there's something you should know. Sarah, she opened a joint credit card with your mom last week, and she used your name on the application. I froze what they claimed you co-signed. My husband caught it when we reviewed the final expenses. He recognized your name on the paperwork. That was it. That was the part that changed everything. I wasn't just the family ATM anymore. I was a target. I sat there, my coffee suddenly cold in my hand, all the room closing in around me as Linda's words echoed in my ear. They claimed you co-signed. I hadn't, not even close. I've always been careful about credit, guarded, even after watching mom default on a car loan in my early 22nd and drag her credit into the basement with mine tethered behind it because, yes, she had convinced me to co-sign that I'd spent the better part of a decade fixing my financial reputation. I knew better. I hadn't signed anything for this wedding outside of what I paid for directly. Do you have a copy of the application? I asked Linda, my voice calm but clipped. I do. She said, would you like me to send it to you immediately? Please. A few minutes later, it landed in my inbox. Oh, there it was, staring back at me. An application for a high-limit wedding credit card with a forged digital signature, my name, address, social security number, even my old work email probably lifted from tax forms or bank records they still had lying around. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel sad. I felt clear all these years. I'd been the fallback plan, the fixer, the silent financier, but forging my name, that wasn't desperation. That was entitlement soaked in fraud. That was theft, and it was the final straw. I filed a fraud report with the credit card company, took screenshots of every detail. Then I filed a police report. I attached the documentation, the forged application, and a notarized statement of non-consent. Then I picked up my phone, and for the first time since mom's smug message that started all this, I called her. She answered on the second ring, like she'd been waiting. Kyle, she said, of her voice, overly cheerful. I was just about to call you. Stop. I said flat. I just want to hear it from you. Did you sign my name on a credit card application? Silence. Kyle, you're being ridiculous. That was just a backup. In case the honeymoon ran over, you know how these things go. Did you sign my name? A long pause. Then Sarah said, you would have done it if you knew it was important. I let that hang there like a guillotine. That's not an answer. I said, my voice cold, but it's fine. You can explain it to the investigator when they call. That cracked her mask. What? Are you serious? Kyle, we're family. You're really going to make this ugly over a little misunderstanding. Mom, I said, cutting her off. You kicked me out of a wedding I paid for, lied to everyone about it, and committed fraud in my name. I didn't make this ugly. You did. I'm just putting it in the light where it belongs. Kyle, honey, please, we can fix this. I hung up. That evening, I drove to my dad's place. He was waiting for me on the porch with 2 beers and that silent weather look he always wore when things got heavy. You okay? He asked as I sat beside him. I nodded slowly. Getting there. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. You just handed me the beer and we watched the sun dip below the trees. Eventually, he said, you did the right thing. And somehow that meant more than anything. The fallout came fast. First came the phone calls from family. My aunts, my cousins, even Uncle Greg, who hadn't spoken to me since 2016 They all wanted to know what was really going on. Why the wedding was off. Why? Sarah had posted a cryptic Instagram story about being betrayed by blood. I didn't respond. Then came the texts. The apologies, the guilt trips. Kyle, I had no idea. We should have stood up for you. Can we please talk? But I was done being there. Emotional janitor, I let the calls go to voicemail. But the texts sit unread. As for the wedding, it never happened. With the venue canceled and no backup secured, they tried to pivot to a backyard ceremony, but the guests were confused. Some turned around mid-flight, and the groom's family, having learned about the forged credit card, called the whole thing off. Apparently, financial fraud before the vows isn't a great look. Sarah went on a posting spree. Cryptic stories, Bible verses, passive-aggressive quotes about snakes in the grass and family who turns their back on you. I didn't flinch because here's the thing. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a dramatic confrontation. It's not yelling or exposing someone in front of a crowd. Sometimes it's just clarity. Quietly dismantling the system that took you for granted, walking away while the whole rotten house collapses behind you. About a week later, I got a final message from Mom. You've made your point. We're all hurting. You didn't have to go this far. I didn't reply. Instead, I changed my number. I took a few days off work and booked a trip solo. Just me and my laptop on the same resort Sarah was supposed to honeymoon at. A funny thing about being the one who booked everything under your name. You know, the cancellation policies, I changed the dates, upgraded the suite, took her champagne package and added it to my reservation. And I sat on that balcony, drink in hand, waves rolling beneath me, thinking about how long I'd waited for someone to see me. But I finally saw myself, not the version they needed me to be, not the fixer, not the bank account, just Kyle. Century E, free, and finally done trying to earn love. I never owed them in the first place. I don't know if they'll ever really understand what they lost, but I do, and I'm not giving it back.